Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, I've got an absolutely jaw-dropping story for you. My name is Dave. I am a 55-year-old industrial electrician. Most of the time my job is to quickly diagnose and fix a problem with a production machine and from time to time replace an electrical motor. I have been in this job for close to 30 years now. I did not attend college, but I did take some technical school classes. 99% of my education came from being taught on the job by a man that even today has forgotten more about doing this work than I will ever learn. I am going to tell the story of my divorce and the aftermath of it. If Darla and I had not gotten divorced this year, it would mark our 30th anniversary. We now have 4 grown children, 3 sons and a daughter. About 18 years ago, Darla returned to school. She was working about 20 hours a week. I was pulling most of the load. Still, we got past it. I was very proud watching Darla graduate from law school. Within 5 years, Darla was working in a large law firm and was getting a lot of court training. For the first few years, everything was okay. We took out some loans and Darla and I had almost paid them off using some of her bonuses. Over time, I started to take note that Darla was getting home later and later. I started asking her what was going on. Our baby daughter was about 16 at the time this started happening. My 2 oldest sons were gone. One was in college in Mississippi and the other son was in the Marines. Many evenings it was just my daughter and I eating dinner because my son was working in the evenings. I started to also notice Darla was not interested in the bedroom and really started getting distant. My daughter noticed and called all her brothers about how their mother was never at home. My son, who was in the Marines, got some leave and came home. He was home almost 2 days before his mother even took notice. That really hurt him. It also pissed him off and he started following his mother. He started to get photos of his mom going into hotels and getting in another man's car many times. I remember standing at a work table working on a motor controller and just started crying. I was ashamed of what my kids were going through. My son and I got into a heated argument about his mother. I knew my marriage was over. My son in Mississippi came home the next day. All 4 of my kids were waiting for their mother to come home. When she did, they jumped on her. My son showed her the photos and told the story of following her. Darla started crying and left the house with the kids following her, calling her all sorts of names. I asked my son to go back to school. My son's leave was up and he returned to North Carolina. Darla never attempted to call me or the kids. All I know is I came home and my daughter told me the slut had packed up and left. I walked to my daughter. I held her head in my hands and after stroking her hair, I asked her not to use that word to describe Darla. She promised me that she would not. I drove to the capital city and found a divorce attorney and told him everything as well as showed him the photos my son took. He wanted my okay to contact all 4 of my kids. I said my daughter is with me but shopping nearby. He spoke to all 4 of them and all 4 said they would testify about their mother. The attorney did say he wanted to find out who Darla's AP was. This was because in a hearing he wants to have him subpoenaed to court. I asked why and he said Darla is an attorney and her firm will circle the wagons around her. He wants the AP on record. He asked me to go spend several hours with my daughter and come back in 3 hours. By then he said he could have the divorce paperwork ready to go over. He was not going to file it though until he knew more about Darla's AP. When my daughter and I returned home, we noticed Darla's car in the driveway. My daughter said, "Daddy, let's go somewhere else until she leaves." My daughter got so upset I knew I had to drive on. I dropped her off at a friend's house and returned home. Darla was still there and was sitting in the living room when I opened the door. Darla wanted to know what she could do to repair her family. She was crying by this time. I said, "Darla, right now all 4 of your babies hate the ground you walk on. How could you be so stupid to do this? If you were unhappy in our marriage, leave, get a divorce." She had no answer and again begged me to let her move back. I simply told her if you move back, the kids will leave. That was the last contact I had with Darla for almost a month. By that time my attorney had identified Darla's AP as one of the married partners at the firm and her boss. My attorney did file the divorce papers. Then the day we got a hearing date, he also subpoenaed her AP at home in front of his wife. I was told the process server told the attorney his wife was standing behind him as he served him. This attorney tried several times to get that subpoena squashed, but the judge said no. He even tried to get it squashed by saying he was going to be Darla's attorney. The judge said, "Okay, but the information I have that backs up the subpoena tells me I need to hear your testimony." The closer the date came to the hearing, the more panicked both of them became. One weekend, I received a phone call from the AP's wife. She wanted to see the photos as well as the photos of her husband going into the hotels. She came to my home, had some tea my daughter had made, and I gave her copies of everything. The day of the hearing came and all 4 of my kids walked into the courthouse along with my attorney and I. Just before the hearing started, I saw AP's wife enter and sit in the back. I wish I could say the judge had a field day with Darla. He did not, because just as soon as the judge called the hearing to order, Darla's attorney said she was not contesting the divorce, did not want the house, did not want my retirement, did not want custody of my daughter, and was not asking for any support. My attorney stood up and said I wanted $250 a month until my daughter was 18. The judge looked at Darla and she nodded. The judge granted the terms and we all walked out and had lunch. Even AP's wife was sitting close by. The AP's wife is very close to my age and her daughters are already grown and married. Her divorce was coming about a month later. My daughter and I attended the hearing. Oh, it was a crap show. Her attorney had subpoenaed Darla. The judge was the same judge that handled our divorce because the AP's wife was a stay-at-home mom. She got the house. She got half of his retirement and close to $1,500 a month for support. I can't remember for how long, but it was a long time. In the years since, the AP's wife and I have spent some time together. All of our kids are friends with each other. She and I both are never going to remarry ever again. Her husband, by a vote of the partners, was forced out. He did go west and is a full partner in another law firm. He left bitter and his now ex told me she would rue the day she divorced him. He would get remarried and find a woman better and younger than she was. Well, according to his daughter, he did just that. Then about 3 years later, his young wife left him. AP's wife is happy and plays with her grandkids. I am playing with mine. My sons to this day will not speak to Darla. She was not allowed around when the grandbabies were born and was told she would be arrested if she showed up to their weddings. My daughter checks up on her from time to time, but they are not as close as a mother and daughter should be. It makes me feel bad that this happened, but my kids are grown and they make their own decisions. After our divorce, Darla moved to Florida and is today a full partner in a law firm in the Tampa area. She is doing well financially and last I heard was living in a home worth a lot of money. A few years ago, Darla came back here to be with my daughter while she was recovering from childbirth. I was sitting in a local restaurant when Darla entered and asked me if she could sit. I waved her to a seat and she ordered some coffee, asked me about our sons, and we made small talk for maybe 20 minutes when she took my hand and said, "Dave, I screwed up really bad." I know. At the time I started my affair, I was making almost twice what you were making. I think I just thought I fell out of love with you, Dave. That was a bad mistake. I know. I told Darla I was the same man she married and it was her that changed. I was then and still proud she got her law degree. Darla started to weep a bit. She told me that her AP said I was a loser that was holding her back. Then she dropped $5 on the table and got up. As she walked away, she told me, "Dave, you're not the loser here. I am." As I watched Darla walk away, I started thinking about how easy it is to listen to people that are toxic. They will cause you nothing but misery in the end. Just found out that my wife of 15 years has been unfaithful. I have been a wonderful husband to my wife, who is a bartender. When I met her, she was a bartender. Even though I didn't like her profession, I always supported her. She makes more than me consistently. I am in construction, so most of my work is seasonal. We don't have any kids. She always thought kids would slow her down with her career. She would make $200 to $300 per night. She was good at what she did and she was gorgeous. Tall blonde, 5 feet 7 inches and in shape. I was in shape too, but not like her. In the slow months, I would always go to the gym consistently. I guess I was too trusting because I never thought she would cheat on me. I always put her first. The most unsettling thing for me was she would always come home late. I mean, like after 4 a.m. a lot. I know most clubs close at 2 a.m., but I didn't think it would take that long just to clean the bar when they make the last call for alcohol. Anyways, I started to notice lately that she was coming home closer to 6 a.m. and not texting me or letting me know anything. When she first started bartending, she would always let me know when she would be home and she was pretty much home to the minute. I decided to ask her about it one morning and she said that she was cleaning her bar and helping other people as well. I thought to myself that has never happened before in prior years, so I said okay and didn't bring it up anymore. A few weeks went by and I started to notice she was on her phone a lot more than normal. To me, that was a red flag right away. I started to write things down that I thought were out of character for her. 1. In the last 3 weeks, she has been coming home after 6 a.m. 2. She has pretty much stopped texting me, letting me know she was on her way home. 3. I have noticed she has been on her phone a lot and even putting her phone away suddenly. So I reached out to a friend of mine, a successful graphic designer, and told him everything I was thinking, and how her behavior has gradually shifted to being non-communicating and distant. He flat out asked me, "How has your sex life been?" I told him it's dropped off drastically. Then he said, "That might be a cause for concern." Then he says, "If your gut is telling you something might be off, then listen to your gut." I told him that worries me. He then said, if she is cheating on you, you need to find out if she is and get out of that marriage. After talking to my friend, I made it a point to go up to the bar where she works and see if I can see anything. So, one night when she went to work, I waited at home until about midnight. I drove up to her bar and waited for an opportunity for me to slip in without her seeing me. While I stood in a corner, I saw her talking to a guy at the bar. She was leaning over and he was rubbing her back. I got a sick feeling in my stomach because that is something I would always do when we were first dating. Then I saw them leave together and go to the back of the bar. I waited for about 20 minutes before going back to where I saw them leave. The crazy thing was the bar was not closed yet and she left with this guy in the back. I went to the back of the bar and I didn't see them. I didn't know where they went off so fast. I left because I lost him. But that night, my suspicions were heightened. Why is she leaving the bar with some guy who was rubbing her back? On the way home, I sent her a few text messages, but she never did reply. I was so angry and distraught I called my friend. It was after 1 a.m. I told him I went to the club and saw my wife talking to a man who rubbed her back and they went through the back door together. He interrupted and said, why in the hell is she leaving the club with some man? I was completely caught off guard because I expected him to say, well, maybe they just left to talk because they couldn't hear each other over the music. I don't know, but that was not the case. He was just as shocked as I was and told me he will call his brother, who is a private investigator, who told me to be available because he wanted to do a three-way call. Later that day, when my wife went to work, we all got on the phone. His brother was already filled in and his brother told me to send a photo of her with ours and he would get right on it. He said, don't worry about it. Someone did the same for me when I went through a divorce. Now I am paying it forward. That day, even though I felt my wife was cheating on me, I felt blessed. About 4 days go by and his brother calls me and asks me what my email address was. He shared a link from Google, I guess from his Google Drive. He shared a video with me that showed my wife leaving with the guy. I assumed it was the same guy. They went out the back door, they got in separate cars. Then they went to a house. When they were walking up to the front door, this guy had his hands on my wife's ass. After seeing that, the video ended and there was another video of his brother who said, call a lawyer. And that's exactly what I did. I am in California, so the divorce laws don't care about cheating, but she made quite a bit more than me, almost $85,000 per year as a bartender. When I met with the lawyer, she told me the video doesn't mean anything here in California, but we can file on irreconcilable differences and go after alimony. That's exactly what I did. I called my buddy and told him I filed for divorce and he told me he advised me not to be in the house when she is served. That was sound advice. It was her house anyway. When her mom passed, she got the house. So one evening when she went to work, I grabbed what I could and loaded it in my buddy's truck. I didn't care about any of the material stuff. It was hers. I didn't have much stuff with my sporadic income. That morning I expected her to call and blow up my phone, but she didn't. The only text she sent me was, where are you? I didn't even respond. While I was dealing with my soon-to-be ex-wife, my friend's brother continued his investigation. He wanted to find out who the guy was that my soon-to-be ex-wife was sleeping with or slept with. It turns out he was here on business and was staying in a company rental and found out he is also married. My friend's brother is in the process of contacting his wife and letting her know what her husband has been up to. A week goes by and my soon-to-be ex-wife is served with divorce papers. This is when she goes crazy asking me, why am I doing this? I am a jerk, etc. I simply told her, you know why I filed for divorce. So as I wait for the divorce hearing, I find out that my friend's brother got in contact with this guy's wife and she is distraught. He shared a link through his Google Drive for her to access. She saw the video of them leaving together and going into a house and walking up to the door with her husband, putting his hands on my wife's ass. Needless to say, she is not happy and wants to divorce herself. So this one-night stand has turned into 2 divorces. Fast forward a few weeks and my soon-to-be ex-wife wanted to meet and talk. I told her I am not interested in anything she has to say. I told her she ripped my heart out and I don't want anything from her. She kept begging and pleading. I just ignored her. On the day of the divorce hearing, my wife's lawyer tried to say she didn't make a lot of money to pay alimony, but the judge wasn't buying it. The court was able to get a hold of her financial information. After everything was said and done, she had to pay me $1,100 a month in alimony for 10 years or until I remarried. My ex-wife's AP didn't fare well either. I heard that he surrendered half of his 401k, $2,000 per month in alimony for 8 years, and she gets half the equity when the house is sold. I also found out her AP was one of the top guys in the company he worked for. My ex-wife has been constantly texting me, asking even after divorce, could we try it again? I simply told her to stop calling and texting me. She asked me one time, why do I hate her? I told her I didn't hate her. I told her I hated the decision she made to destroy our marriage for someone she hasn't even known for a month. I told her I didn't understand why she did this. She had a great husband who loved her very much. We had a nice home. We traveled and went on vacations when my construction jobs were flourishing. I just didn't get it. Needless to say, I was very hurt by what she did. It was a difficult time in my life and I had to start all over again. I was able to find another job and start over, but it was not easy. I was angry for a long time. It's been 5 months after the divorce and the ex-wife still sends me messages every once in a while asking how am I doing and wanting to see me even after I have already told her I want nothing to do with her. I listen to the stories Tony has on his channel and I used to think that some of them were BS until it happened to me. And I want to thank him for taking the time to share my story. And to anyone out there going through the same thing, get out as fast as you can. Don't wait. Stick around until the end to see how everything unfolded. And don't forget to like, comment and subscribe for more intense stories. Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, I've got an absolutely jaw-dropping story for you. Fuck. How does he know? How does Dave know about this? My marriage is over, I just know it. The courts will find Dave to be the primary caretaker of our children. He will be awarded custody. I will be a social pariah shunned by virtually everyone in this church-going community, forgiven by the priest with soft words, but with a judgmental look on his face, just as he did with Mary Skelton. She only lasted about 3 months or so after her husband found out about her affair. 3 lonely months when the rest of the community shunned her, even though the priest forgave her. This community really hates cheating spouses. I slammed on the brakes and screeched to a halt, stopping 2 meters away from colliding with a little girl who ran out into the road chasing a ball. She looked to be about 3, about the same age as my Paula. I was driving too fast, too absorbed in my enormous problem. The kid's mother scowled at me from the sidewalk, even though it was her fucking fault for not watching her kid. I looked around and saw that I was near a large park 5 minutes from home. I suppressed my fears, drove with shaky hands another 200 meters and stopped before hitting someone absent-mindedly. How could Dave even think? No, it's stupid. Once Dave found out I was having an affair, it makes sense that he thought poorly of me and wanted to cover his bases. He may run a small newsroom from home, but that doesn't mean he's stupid. Far from it. As soon as he found out, of course, he thought it wasn't my first case and started doing DNA tests on the kids. But how the hell did he know? And Carl and I had been so careful. Thoughts reminded me of Carl. I picked up my phone and moved on to Carla if Dave ever asked a recently started coworker. My motto was to stay as close to the truth as possible. My message, can you talk? As I waited for an answer, I kept kicking myself. Why did I let this smooth-talking little asshole seduce me? No, come on, be honest, it's not fair. The way we slept together the first time wasn't seduction and is completely understandable. It happened when we were out of town. We had just spent 2 whole days negotiating an exhausting deal, celebrated with too much champagne, and fell into bed together. If I had settled on the first case, everything would have been fine. I would have had a secret that I would have regretted until my last day. A serious secret that could only hurt my husband and family. But or should I say we, alas. We were both gripped by the excitement of sleeping with someone after more than 10 years of marriage. The allure of the illegality of it all, the thrill of the naughtiness. The excellence of realizing that we had cheated on our spouses and successfully hid it from 2 people who knew us so well, or not successfully hiding it as it turns out. My musings were interrupted by a text from Carl. No, having dinner with Mary and the kids. What's the matter? Well, they say misery loves company. He knows Dave knows about us. How the hell did Dave find out about this? We were incredibly discreet, only got together when we were away, and that was only if we managed to get adjoining rooms. We never walked through the door of the same room together, always used condoms even the first time. We behaved completely normally, both in public and when we were at home with our spouses. Zing, damn, Mary is acting normal, so he didn't say anything to her. Do you think he will? How angry is he? I don't know, we haven't talked yet. I ran away as soon as I found out he knew. This time I didn't have to wait long for an answer. Please beg him not to tell Mary, selfish little prick. Screw my marriage while it's none of his business. Asshole, I'll probably tell his wife if Dave doesn't. Like I said, misery loves company. So how did we get discovered? I made sure my love for my husband wasn't compromised. Didn't introduce any new positions or techniques I learned from Carl. Fucking chance. Sex with Carl was vanilla and uninspiring. It was smaller, held for less time, and nowhere near as varied as my Dave. In fact, if it hadn't been for the illegality of it all, it wouldn't have lasted the 6 times over the 7 months we'd actually had it. How unlucky that we were discovered before I was about to end our affair after our next trip in 2 weeks. Damn it. Focus, Megan. How we were discovered is irrelevant. We were exposed, and now my husband trusts me so little that he's doing DNA tests on our children. My mind went back 20 minutes to when I got home late, too late to enjoy dinner with my family. Thankfully, Dave worked from home, took the kids to school, and cooked dinner 6 nights a week. I was supposed to cook on Sundays, but I usually went out and got takeout. Let's just say cooking is not one of my strengths. As I walked through the door, I froze at the horrifying sight. Dave is sitting on one of the kitchen chairs with a cotton swab on a stick, wiping the inside of Jillian's, our 5-year-old daughter's, mouth with it. An open sterilized bag lies on the table. Peter, our 7-year-old son, was also standing there, either waiting his turn or already finished. I had read enough stories and watched enough TV shows to know that I was watching the opening act of a DNA test. My initial reaction was rage. How dare Dave think the kids weren't his? I wasn't a whore, or was I? Knowing I needed to think about how best to get over it, I just turned and ran. Just before I did, Dave turned to look at me with a neutral expression. I brought my hands to my cheeks, remembering the sensation of the blood rushing off them, which was a blatant admission of the truth of what the testing had accused me of. 20 minutes later, here I am, reflecting on the destruction of my family and my community. I knew Dave. I knew him as well as he knew himself. As soon as he was ready to confront me, he did so firmly and calmly. He wouldn't want the whole town to know he'd been hornswoggled. If I can't stop him from divorcing me, I'll ask him to do it quietly, just to say we're estranged. That way, even if I lose my marriage, I can still stay in town and see my kids, perhaps sharing joint custody. I really do love them. My mind wandered for God knows how long, running through different scenarios of how Dave would react, trying to find the scenario that would allow me to lose the least. Suddenly, I realized that I was reasoning like a defeatist. I'm using my knowledge of Dave and assuming that a breakup would go without saying, and the best scenario would be a quiet divorce. But what if I'm wrong? What if I put myself at Dave's mercy? I tell him about the forgivable first time and the regrettable sequel. He doesn't want a divorce any more than I do. Sure, his faith in me will be shaken, and it will take years for him to fully trust me again. But I'll still have the respectability and support of the community. If you do this, Megan, you'll have to be completely honest with Dave. One whiff of a lie, and you'll get to the curb faster than a fast-footed cheetah. I glanced at my watch. Just under 2 hours had passed since I discovered that I hadn't been as clever at hiding my affair with Carl as I'd thought. 2 hours since I'd gone from being confident in my marriage to fighting for his very life. 2 hours since I'd seen my husband testing my children's DNA, had raised my blood pressure 100 points. I quickly typed a message. I'm on my way home to apologize to you for my affair with Carl. Please don't do anything rash. Then slowly headed home in my car. Epilogue of Megan. Well, what happened after that surpassed my worst nightmare. 10 minutes after sending my text message, I made it home. As soon as I pulled into the driveway, Dave jumped out the door, tossed me, "Stay here and watch the kids," and sped off in his car screaming. I found out later that he headed straight for Carl's house. And when my lover opened the door, broke his nose in one blow, screaming, "You're sleeping with my wife, aren't you?" Those words stopped Carl's wife calling the police. And together with Dave, they learned the whole story as Carl begged them to call him an ambulance. Since Carl said he had been hit and his wife claimed he had hit the wall himself, the police investigation went nowhere. By the time he returned from the hospital, the locks on his house had been changed, and his wife had made an online appointment with a divorce attorney. How do I know all this? Dave came straight home, told me to pack a bag and leave. Taking one look at the fire in his eyes and the bruises on his knuckles, guessing where they came from, I did as he asked, and fled to a mid-range motel. The next day, I saw a bandaged Carl at the bar at breakfast. All hopes that Dave would be quiet came crashing down early in the afternoon when Carl and I were invited into the chief operating officer's office and summarily executed. She didn't cite any morals because our contracts simply stated that she shouldn't hire scumbags like us. Oops. I realized what the immediate future would be like when I called all 3 divorce attorneys in our town, but no one returned my call. When I went to the diner for dinner, the waitress refused to acknowledge my existence. The nail in the coffin lid, however, was when I met with Carl and learned that family, friends, and former coworkers already treated him like a leper. Within 2 days, spurred on by a visit from the motel manager who stated that his establishment was fully booked. Yeah, right, Carl and I accepted the inevitable and left town. We didn't want to become social ghosts, which we saw Mary Skelton become last year when she was caught cheating. We drove 300 kilometers and started a new life together. It didn't last long. I know I'm probably stating the damn obvious, but when 2 cheaters get together, there is no trust, stupid. I never realized how important trust is in a relationship until tonight when I had to fight the urge to check his phone while he was in the bathroom. By the time I finally worked up the courage to ask Dave if I could go back into town to visit the kids over the weekend, they had all found a replacement for me. He was perfect prey, and once he was on the loose, the vultures, being attractive singles and widows, declared their interest. By the time I cleaned myself up, there was already a nifty set of shoes under Dave's bed. My kids had a half-sister, and they were already calling the other woman Mom. Now that I'm too old to start another family, all I can do is sit and ponder the lonely life ahead of me. Epilogue of Dave. I lie here glancing at the bedside clock, 11:05 p.m. The soft breathing of Ruth lying next to me reminds me of our sexual marathon of the last 2 hours. Damn, sex with someone new after 10 years with the same woman was good. Damn good. We did some things that were borderline inappropriate. Yeah, life is good, but it's a little weird. My wife cheated on me, but before I could mourn the demise of that marriage too much, I was seduced by a younger, prettier, and sexually more adventurous one. The surreal last day of my old marriage still confuses the hell out of me. Maybe if I digest it in my head for the 10,000th time, it will finally make sense. How'd it go? On the last day of my marriage, Megan came running home and without saying a word, just turned around and left again. I heard her car start and drive away. I was busy for a few more minutes, and by the time I called Megan's cell phone, it was busy. Finding no sign of her presence, I started putting the kids to bed and they were fast asleep. Unfortunately, the fact that they didn't see their mother before they went to bed was not unusual. I went into the kitchen and was just about to call Megan again when the house phone rang. An unrecognized cell phone number popped up on the display. The next few minutes from memory went something like this. Hi, this is David Brown speaking. Hi Dave, it's Carl. I knew Carl, of course. He started working with my wife a while back. I had seen him at several work events and was even invited to his housewarming party. What was his wife's name? Rebecca Beck, something like that. Very handsome, well-built, and a couple years younger than Megan and me. Carl, on the other hand, seemed like a bore. Arrogant, smug, he looked down on me. A legend in his own mind. The last person I'd want to talk to after a hard day. Which is why my next words probably didn't sound very friendly. Yeah, Carl, what can I do for you? What would it take? I had no idea what he was talking about, and in confusion I remained silent, forcing him to continue. If my wife finds out I've been having an affair with Megan for the last 6 months or so, she'll cut my balls off and I'll lose my kids. So I'll be honest, Dave, what does it take to keep your mouth shut? I don't remember dropping my phone and collapsing to the floor, as the crushing news that my loving wife had betrayed me in the worst possible way hit my consciousness. I had suspected nothing and could not believe it. Yet the pleading in Carl's voice was quite compelling. My mind then turned to a recently frequently discussed problem. Why had my wife seemed to have become emotionally distant from me and the kids over the past 6 months or so? Nothing drastic, just definitely something there. I later realized that the first stage of grief, denial, lasted less than 30 minutes. That stage was followed by anger. I was filled with a blind rage that masked the pain of my loss. I still had enough self-control not to snap at Megan. That led to prison. Her lover, however, was a completely different person. As soon as I heard Megan was back, I drove to the asshole's house and with all the anger I had, punched him. The feeling of bones and cartilage breaking under my fist made me smile even now. Carl's forced confession while his blood dripped was completely unnecessary for me, but necessary for his wife. Releasing my anger allowed me to go home and calmly tell Megan to fuck off. Listening to my woman's light snoring in bed, I realized I was no closer to solving the mystery than the last 100 times I'd thought about it. Why had Carl himself sown the seeds of the destruction of his own marriage by confessing to me when I was completely unsuspecting? Once again, I couldn't escape the thought that Megan's strange behavior that night when she'd come home from work and immediately run off without saying a word had something to do with all of this. I replayed that night in my head once more. I made dinner as I always did. Megan confirmed she would be late, so we sat and ate with the kids, chatting as usual. Then it started to clear up. Jillian complained that a spot in her mouth hurt. I grabbed a flashlight, turned her bottom lip down and saw an ulcer. Walking over to our first aid cabinet, I grabbed a tube of Boniella and one of the individually wrapped cotton swabs, opened, applied, and used the cream as directed. Absolutely nothing to do with the mystery at hand. Heck, I was beginning to suspect I'd never find out. Turning onto my side, I slid my arm under the sleeping beauty's head and cuddled her, kissing the back of her neck gently. She snuggled against me and purred lightly. To hell with the mystery, life is good. This story is called My Wife of 9 Years Cheated with 2 Men at Her Friend's Bachelorette Party. It was my wife's best friend's bachelorette party. They had planned a weekend at a cabin and my wife was really excited to go. I trusted her and didn't think anything of it. The night before she left, she came into our bedroom while I was getting ready for bed. She sat on the bed next to me and I could tell she had something on her mind. She said to me, "Thank you for letting me go. I just want to go and have fun and support my friend who is getting married in a few weeks." I said, "Of course, have a great time." She then leaned in to kiss me and we went to bed. The next morning she left early with her friends. I didn't hear from her much over the weekend, which wasn't unusual, but we did text each other a lot. On Sunday night, she sent me a text saying that she was on her way home and would be home in a few hours. When she got home, she looked like she had a good time and she was very happy. The next day I went to work and my wife went to her friend's house to help her get ready for the wedding. Over the next few weeks, my wife was helping her friend prepare for her wedding. She would leave work and go to her friend's house for a few hours a couple of days a week. Then one day while I was at work, I overheard some coworkers saying something about a video surfacing about what went on at this bachelorette party at this cabin. I asked what they were talking about and they said that apparently this video shows a woman getting banged by two men. At this point, I didn't know who the woman was. Over the next couple of days, I started hearing more people talk about this video and I was sort of curious. So after work one day, my wife wasn't home yet. So I started digging around on the computer, going to different websites to see if I could find this video people were talking about, but I couldn't find anything. My wife came home a few hours later and I asked her about the video. She had a confused look on her face. She didn't know anything about a video. So I laughed it off and said, "I wonder what went on at that cabin." I couldn't see my wife's face. The next day I went to work and as soon as I sat down at my desk, one of my coworkers said, "Hey, have you seen that video?" I told him I hadn't been able to find it. He pulled out his phone and started showing me the video. It was the same video that people had been talking about. I was in complete shock. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It shows four half-naked men walking into the cabin with all the women in the background cheering. And then the men started going around one by one, dancing in front of all the women. I am still laughing because I assumed that's all that went on. But then the video keeps going and it shows one of the men getting really close to this woman who happened to be my wife. My whole demeanor changed. I was no longer laughing. She starts touching him. And then another man comes up behind her and he starts touching her as well. Gets worse. One man picks my wife up over his shoulder and takes her in this room. And the other man follows. My mouth hit the floor. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Eventually, both men come out of the room with my wife following behind them. She has a big smile on her face and she's completely naked. The video ends there. And I just sat there in shock. I didn't know what to do, but I gathered my composure. I then asked my coworker, "Can he send me the video?" Which he did. I wasn't going to tell my wife what I just saw. I am angry, devastated. She cheated with these two strange men without a hitch, like it was nothing and I didn't matter. So the rest of the day at work I was a zombie. I couldn't even think straight. But I finally got a hold of myself and made some phone calls. I called a friend of mine who's a lawyer and I asked him what I should do. He told me to take my time and think about what I want to do. But he also said if it were him, he would go ahead and file for divorce. After the brief conversation with my friend, I called a divorce lawyer to find out what I could do based on my wife cheating and what she was entitled to. I told him we had no kids, but we own the house that we have a mortgage on and we both have jobs. He told me if I wanted to stay in the house, I could file for divorce and try to get my wife out of the house, but it would be a long battle and I may not win. So, after talking with two different lawyers, I made my decision. I was going to divorce my wife. I would file for divorce the next day. There wasn't a damn thing she could say to me why she did that to me. And I'm thinking she doesn't even know about the video. That night I couldn't even sleep. I was so upset. I just kept thinking about that video and how my wife could do something like that to me. The next morning, I woke up early around 6 a.m. I couldn't go back to sleep. So I got out of bed, got dressed and went to work. My wife was still asleep. I didn't even say anything to her. For those of you who are wondering, we haven't been intimate and I haven't initiated anything with my wife since that video. When I got to work, I told my boss I needed to take some time off. He could tell something was wrong, but he didn't ask any questions. I then went home while my wife was at work. I began to pack some of her clothes and other things, and I packed up a couple of suitcases and put them by the door. When I was finished, I waited until about 11:30 in the morning or so. I pulled out my phone, found the link to the video and sent it to my wife. It showed that she read it right away. When I saw that, I immediately FaceTimed her and told her I wanted a divorce. I already filed and she needs to come get her stuff. She hung up on me and then she called me back about 5 minutes later and told me she was on her way home. I told her when she gets here, I will be upstairs in my office and I don't want to see her face. When she gets home, she is crying and bawling, asking where in the hell did I get this video. I told her I am not telling you that, you just need to leave. She then says I am not going anywhere. This is my house too. She then says we are married. You can't just kick me out. I told her we won't be married for long. She gets on her phone and calls her best friend, crying and telling her friend that I am trying to kick her out of the house. And I have this video of her. Her best friend then tells her she needs to come over to her house and she will call a lawyer for her. So my wife hangs up the phone, grabs a couple of suitcases and leaves. Then her best friend calls me and asks why am I trying to kick her out of the house? I promptly send my wife's best friend the link. I assumed that my wife had shown her, but apparently not. After my wife's best friend saw the video, she told me she would be contacting a lawyer for my wife, and that I needed to leave my wife alone. I told my wife's friend, this is between my wife and me, not you. And for your information, I have already filed for divorce. As the days go by, my wife is texting me, calling me, pleading and leaving voicemails. I didn't respond at all. I then get a call from my wife's lawyer. He asks, do I have a lawyer? I promptly gave him that information. He said thank you, and hung up the phone. A few days later, I received paperwork from my wife's lawyer. It was divorce paperwork. I read through the paperwork and faxed it to my lawyer. I also emailed my lawyer, letting him know that I received the paperwork. A few days after that, I get a call from my lawyer and I ask him what is my soon-to-be ex-wife asking for. He then proceeds to tell me she is asking for half of everything, the house and one car. He said surprisingly she is not asking for alimony. I told him her father is wealthy. He owns 4 hotels and a bunch of other businesses. So I am pretty sure she will be just fine. I then told my lawyer I want her out of the house and I want her name off of everything. He said that is going to be a little difficult, but he will see what he can do. A few weeks later, I am at work and I get a call from my lawyer and he said he had some bad news. He said since her name is on the deed, you can't just kick her out. And since she wants half of the house, you probably will have to sell it. I told him I don't want to sell the house. I love that house. It was our first home together. He then said the choice is yours, but if you don't sell the house, you will have to go to court and fight for it. So I told my attorney I plan to fight for the house and I don't want to sell it. A few weeks later, I am served with divorce papers and a court date is set. I show up to court and so does my wife. We both have our lawyers with us. The judge asks my wife what she wants, and she says half of everything, the house and one car. The judge then looks at me and asks my lawyer, what does his client want? My attorney says he wants a divorce and he wants her out of the house and her name off of everything. The judge looks at both lawyers and then looks at us. And he asks us if there is anything we can agree on. My wife and I look at each other and we both shake our heads. No. The judge then says here in Alabama, which is a no-fault state, can be fault-based as well. And adultery is one of those faults. The judge, who was a woman, looks at my wife and says, young lady, you have committed adultery and I am going to grant your husband a divorce on the grounds of adultery. The judge then looks at my wife and says, ma'am, I am ordering you to move out of the house within 30 days, but you have a mortgage together. I can't do anything about that. You have to work that out with your mortgage lender. He then says, sir, she can move back into the house. If she wants, it's the marital home and she has a right to it. But if she does move back in, she has 30 days to move back out. The judge then looks at me and says, I am ordering you to pay the mortgage until it is paid off or sold. The judge asks if there is anything else. And her lawyer says that my wife wants one of the cars. The judge looks at me and says, is that true? I then tell the judge, yes, she can have one of the cars, but she has to pay for it herself. The judge says she can have the car. After that, the judge grants the divorce. About a week later, after the divorce, my ex-wife sends me a text saying she will not be moving back in. She just wants her part of the equity in the home, and she will sign the house over to me. I text her back and I tell her the only equity we have is $30,000 and I told her I would give her half of that once I refinanced and all the other legal stuff was taken care of. I gave her half of the small equity we had in the home. A few months later, my wife's father dies and she inherits $3 million. Yeah, she didn't need anything from me. Even if her father didn't pass away, she would have still been okay. Her father would have looked after her, and I will not take her back just because she inherited millions and she has tried. She has called and texted, but I have not responded and I will not. I know a lot of responses were take her back because of the money, but I didn't want to touch her. I didn't think of her the same. To this day, her best friend and my ex-wife still doesn't know who recorded the video at the cabin that weekend. Well, after all that drama, I am a free man. I was surprised at the responses I got on this site, but I guess these forums can be helpful. Thank you all for your awesome support. As a man in his 40s, I am absolutely grateful that I did not have any kids with this woman. If you enjoyed the story, please like, comment, and consider subscribing to the channel for more content. I sincerely appreciate your time. Stick around until the end to see how everything unfolded, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more intense stories. Hey everyone! Welcome back to the channel. I believed in us. We were high school sweethearts and our love story was the kind people dream of. 9 years of what I believed to be marital bliss shattered in an instant. It was a video message sent from an anonymous number that ripped my world apart. The video showed my wife at a bachelorette party. A night she told me was just about harmless fun with her friends. Turned out to be far from that. In the grainy footage I saw her with a man, their actions clear and heart-wrenching. A tidal wave of betrayal washed over me. My heartbeat sounded loud in my ears. The video ended, but the image kept playing over and over in my mind. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted was leading a life I knew nothing about. I felt a strange combination of anger, heartbreak, and annoying sense of confusion. How did we get here? Was our love not real? I felt as though I was teetering on the edge of a precipice, the ground crumbling beneath me. I knew then I couldn't let this slide. The love I had for her, the memories we made, they demanded truth. I needed to know the extent of her infidelity. So with a heavy heart and a need for answers, I decided to hire a private investigator. It was a step I never thought I'd have to take, but here I was faced with the unthinkable. This was just the beginning of the unraveling. The day after the video arrived, I woke up with a purpose. The dull ache in my chest hadn't subsided, but there was a newfound determination in me. The decision to hire a private investigator was not taken lightly. It felt like admitting that my marriage was beyond saving. Yet I needed answers, a full understanding of the depth of my wife's betrayal. I spent the morning researching, sifting through local private investigation firms. I sought an experienced professional, someone who could discreetly uncover the truth. I finally settled on a firm with a stellar reputation for handling delicate domestic cases. I made the call and within minutes, I was pouring out my story to a stranger. The voice on the other end was calm, reassuring, and professional, promising to handle the case with the utmost discretion. As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief because I had taken a step towards the truth, dread because of what that truth might reveal. I looked around our home, the home I thought was filled with love and trust. It felt different now, tainted by the bitter sting of betrayal. The private investigator would start work the next day. I braced myself for what was to come. And as I did, I realized that this was more than just about uncovering my wife's secrets. It was about me taking control, reclaiming my life from the devastation that had been thrust upon me. The path to truth was set and there was no turning back. In the days that followed, the private investigator began his work in earnest. The first set of reports came in just a week after the investigation began. As I read through them, my heart sank. My wife had not just cheated at the bachelorette party. She had been leading a double life for the past 2 years, meeting multiple men at hidden corners of our city, leaving a trail of deceit that now lay bare before me. Photographs, text messages, and even audio recordings, the evidence was overwhelming. I felt a cold anger welling up inside me, as the woman I thought I knew became a stranger in front of my eyes. Her laughter echoed in our home, a haunting reminder of the duplicity that had been living with me. Each revelation brought with it a fresh wave of pain, but it also brought clarity. The late-night phone calls she said were from work. The weekend trips with her girlfriends, the times when she seemed distant, it all started to make sense. As I sifted through the evidence, I felt a strange sense of vindication. My suspicions were confirmed, and while the truth was agonizing, it was better than the torment of uncertainty. The investigation had provided me with a solid ground to stand on, a foundation upon which I could start rebuilding my life. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of my journey towards reclaiming my life. With the bitter truth laid bare, I knew I needed to protect myself, and that meant securing my finances. The thought of my wife, the woman who had betrayed me, having access to my hard-earned money was repulsive. I spent the next day meeting with my bank, opening 2 new accounts in my name alone. It was an arduous process filled with endless paperwork, but every signature felt like a step towards my independence. Next, I removed my wife from my life insurance policy. It felt surreal, erasing her name from a document that at once signified our mutual trust and commitment. I knew this was just the beginning of the long bureaucratic journey of disentangling our lives, but it was a necessary step. Finally, I closed our joint credit card accounts. These cards, once symbols of our shared life and dreams, had become reminders of our shattered trust. I cut them up, each snip of the scissors echoing the finality of my decision. Throughout the day, I was fueled by a sense of urgency, a drive to take control of my life again. I was determined not to be a victim, but to be the architect of my own future. And while the emotional wounds were still raw, these practical steps gave me a sense of empowerment. I was not just reacting to my wife's betrayal, but proactively protecting myself. It was a small victory in a sea of turmoil, but it was my victory. And for now, that was enough. With my financial house in order, the next step was clear. I needed to seek legal counsel. It was time to make this separation official, to start the process of legally detaching myself from the woman who had broken our vows. I contacted a local attorney, renowned for his expertise in handling complex divorce cases. I laid out the evidence before him, the pile of photographs, text messages, and audio clips, each one a dagger in my heart. He listened attentively, his face a mask of professional empathy. When I was done, he assured me that the evidence was substantial, and that it would significantly influence the proceedings in my favor. We discussed the various aspects of the divorce, the division of assets, the fate of our house, and even the possibility of alimony. As I listened to him talk about the legal implications of my wife's infidelity, I felt a strange sense of detachment. It was as though we were discussing a business transaction, not the end of a relationship that at once meant the world to me. As I left his office, I felt an odd sense of relief. I had taken another major step in reclaiming control over my life. I was no longer just a man who had been cheated on. I was the man who was taking charge, making decisions, and protecting my interests. It was a small consolation, but at that moment it was enough to keep me moving forward. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, the need to confront my wife grew stronger. With the knowledge of her betrayal and my lawyer's counsel, I decided it was time. I felt a strange calm wash over me as I prepared to face the woman who had once been the center of my world. One evening, as she returned home, I asked her to sit down. There was a brief flicker of confusion in her eyes, quickly replaced by a mask of indifference. I wondered how many times she had worn that mask while lying to me. I confronted her about her infidelity, laying bare the evidence I had gathered. I watched as her face turned from surprise to shock, and then finally to guilt. But there was something else too. A hint of defiance that made my blood boil. I demanded that she leave our home. I wanted to erase her presence, to cleanse our shared space of the deceit that had tainted it. Her refusal to leave, however, was a punch to my gut. Her insistence on staying, even after everything she had done, was a slap in the face. Our home, once a sanctuary filled with love and laughter, had become a battlefield. The tension was palpable as we circled around each other. The silence between us heavy with unspoken words and pent-up emotions. Yet, amidst the chaos and pain, I found a shred of comfort in the confrontation. I had stood up for myself, faced the woman who had betrayed me, and demanded the respect I deserved. It was a small victory, but it was mine. And in that moment it gave me the strength to keep fighting. My wife's refusal to leave the house was a harsh blow. It felt as if she was mocking me, insisting on her presence in a home that no longer felt like ours. Despite the confrontation and the evidence of her infidelity, she seemed determined to hold her ground. In my frustration, I sought advice from my lawyer. The news was less than favorable. Despite the house being mine, I couldn't legally force her to leave the marital home until after the divorce was finalized. It was a bitter pill to swallow. The walls of our house, once filled with love, now felt like a prison. Living under the same roof with her was unbearable. Each shared glance was a reminder of her betrayal. Each encounter a test of my patience. I felt a growing resentment towards her, an emotion that was new and unwelcome. However, I couldn't let her refusal to leave break me. I was already in the process of reclaiming my life, and I wasn't about to let her defiance stop me. I retreated into myself, choosing to focus on my well-being and the legal proceedings at hand. The house was no longer a home, but a battleground where we coexisted in uncomfortable silence. Yet, in the midst of this tense standoff, I held my ground. I knew that this was just a temporary obstacle, a storm that I had to weather before I could finally move on. And so, I braced myself for the challenging days ahead, determined to stand my ground. With each passing day, the tension within the house grew. The silence was deafening, punctuated only by the occasional forced conversations necessary for cohabitation. The standoff had turned into a waiting game, each of us anticipating the final verdict that would set us free from this toxic environment. In the midst of this strained silence, I continued to focus on the divorce proceedings. The paperwork seemed endless, each document a cold reminder of our crumbling marriage. Yet, there was a grim satisfaction in each completed form, each signed affidavit, small steps toward my newfound freedom. In the midst of this turmoil, I found pleasure in simple routines, like cooking my meals, going for a run, or even reading a book in the quiet corner of our house provided much-needed distractions from the harsh reality. Despite the strained atmosphere, I found myself growing stronger. I was no longer the same man who had discovered his wife's betrayal. I was evolving, becoming more resilient, more determined. With every passing day, I was less the victim and more the survivor. My wife's presence was a constant reminder of her infidelity, Yet it also served as a catalyst, pushing me to fast-track the divorce proceedings. I was eager to reclaim my space, to banish the ghost of her betrayal from my life. But for now I had to be patient, to play the waiting game until the final verdict was delivered. The day finally arrived when the divorce proceedings officially began. The courtroom was sterile and intimidating. As I sat across from my wife, a surge of emotions washed over me. I was about to legally sever ties with the woman I had once vowed to spend my life with. The proceedings were complex and emotionally taxing. My lawyer presented the evidence of her infidelity, each piece a stark reminder of her betrayal. The court listened, the judge's face impassive, as he leafed through the documents, detailing my wife's double life. My wife's lawyer attempted to defend her, spinning tales and twisting truths. It was a difficult thing to witness, yet I remained stoic, focusing on the end goal. I reminded myself that this was a necessary step towards my freedom. Despite the bitter taste of proceedings left in my mouth, I felt a sense of progress. With each passing minute, I was closer to being free from the chains of this failed marriage. The courtroom, while intimidating, was the arena where I was finally able to voice my grievances, to demand justice for the wrong done to me. As I left the courtroom that day, I felt exhausted, yet strangely exhilarated. The journey was far from over, but I had survived the first battle. I was one step closer to reclaiming my life. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to hope for a brighter future. As the divorce proceedings continued, the emotional toll started to weigh heavily on me. Even though I was determined to move forward, I found myself grappling with feelings of loss, betrayal, and loneliness. I would sometimes find myself wandering through the house, the echoes of the past resonating off the walls. The memories of happier times would sneak up on me, bringing with them a fresh wave of pain. The woman I had once loved, the woman I had shared my dreams with, was now a stranger. There were nights when I lay awake, plagued by a sea of unanswered questions. Why did she cheat? Where did we go wrong? Could I have done something different? These thoughts would spin around in my head, leaving me feeling lost and confused. Despite the pain, I knew I had to confront these emotions. I allowed myself to grieve, to feel the loss. It was a part of the healing process, a necessary step towards moving on. In the midst of this emotional turmoil, I found peace in unexpected places. The chance meeting with an old friend led to regular coffee catch-ups. A neglected hobby was rediscovered, providing a welcome distraction. Slowly, I started building a support system, drawing strength from these small yet significant connections. The emotional struggle was real and it was hard, but I was learning to navigate it, finding my way through the storm one day at a time. And with each passing day, I felt a little stronger, a little more resilient. I was not just surviving, I was learning to thrive. Finally, the day of the final verdict arrived. As I sat in the courtroom, heart pounding, I felt an odd mix of fear and relief. Today, the legal ties that bound me to my wife would be severed. The judge delivered the verdict with a stern, impartial expression. The evidence of my wife's infidelity coupled with my lawful conduct throughout the process influenced the decision. The house was granted to me, a significant victory in the long, arduous battle. My wife's face remained unreadable as the verdict was pronounced, her emotions hidden behind a mask of indifference. I felt a pang of resentment towards her, yet there was also a sense of closure. As I left the courtroom, the finality of the situation hit me. I was now officially divorced. The chapter of my life that had been tainted by betrayal and pain was finally closed. With the final verdict, the reality of my new status settled in. I was a divorced man at 30. The house, once filled with shared dreams and laughter, was now solely mine. It felt larger, emptier, yet it was a canvas ready for a fresh start. In the days that followed, I began the process of removing her presence from my space. I packed up her belongings, each item a bitter reminder of our shared past. I rearranged the furniture, painted the walls a new color, and even adopted a dog, a long-held dream of mine that she'd always vetoed. Yet the quiet was sometimes too loud. The absence of her presence was a constant reminder of the void that the end of our marriage had left in my life. I found myself grappling with the loneliness that the silence brought, but I also found moments of peace in it. Despite the pain, I started to see the glimmers of a new beginning in the aftermath. It was the start of a journey where I was in control, a journey towards healing and self-discovery. And while the road seemed long and arduous, I was ready to embark on it, one step at a time. As weeks turned into months, I slowly adjusted to my new normal. The house, once a stark reminder of my failed marriage, started to feel like home again. The silence, which had initially been overwhelming, was now comforting. My daily routines evolved without her presence. I started cooking for myself, trying out recipes that I had always wanted to, I spent evenings reading in the quiet corner of the house or playing with my new dog. I started to rebuild my social life, reconnecting with old friends and making new ones. I took up hobbies that I had long neglected, finding joy in activities that I had forgotten about. I also started therapy, a decision that proved instrumental in my healing process. It provided a safe space to process my emotions, to understand my feelings of betrayal and grief, and to learn how to trust again. Adjusting to the new normal was not easy. There were moments of loneliness, moments when the weight of the past threatened to pull me down. But with each passing day, the pain dulled a bit, replaced by a newfound sense of hope. I was learning to live again, to find joy in the small things and to look forward to the future. The healing process was slow and often painful, but I was committed to it. I started to understand that it wasn't the linear journey. There were days when I felt strong and optimistic, and there were days when the pain seemed unbearable. But I held on, knowing that each day was a step towards healing. Therapy was a significant part of my healing journey. It helped me unpack the layers of betrayal, resentment, and grief. It helped me understand that it was okay to feel the way I did, that healing took time. I started to learn how to forgive, not for her but for me. I started to indulge in self-care, taking time each day to do something that made me happy, whether it was reading a book, going for a run, or simply sitting in my backyard with my dog. These moments of solitude were therapeutic. I also started journaling, a practice that proved to be incredibly cathartic. Writing about my feelings, my fears, and my hopes helped me process my emotions. It provided an outlet for the whirlwind of emotions that often threatened to consume me. Through this healing process, I realized that I was more than just a man who had been cheated on. I was a survivor, a fighter. I was someone who had faced betrayal and heartbreak, yet was still standing. And with each passing day, I was becoming stronger. The year had passed since the day I discovered my wife's betrayal. Felt like a lifetime ago. I was not the same man I was back then. I had grown, evolved, and healed. I had weathered the storm and emerged stronger. I was finally able to look back at the past without the sharp sting of betrayal. I accepted that my marriage was a part of my life that had ended, a chapter that had closed. It was a part of my journey, but it did not define me. As I sat in my house, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The walls that once echoed with deceit were now filled with hope and resilience. The rooms that once felt cold and empty were now filled with warmth and love for myself. I felt ready to move on, to open myself up to new experiences, new people. The thought of dating again was both exciting and terrifying, but I knew I was ready to take the leap. I was ready to explore this new chapter of my life. My journey had been a roller coaster of emotions filled with heartbreak and healing. But as I looked back, I realized that it was also a journey of self-discovery and growth. I had faced the worst and had come out stronger. I was ready for whatever life had in store for me. And so, with a sense of optimism and hope, I stepped into the new chapter of my life. Oh, I forgot to add, my ex-wife was thrown in jail for driving under the influence a few months after the divorce. She had lost her job, moved back in with her mom. Last I heard, she was still living at home at 31 years old. Stick around until the end to see how everything unfolded. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more intense stories. Hey everyone! Welcome back to the channel. Today's story is about betrayal, heartbreak, and an unexpected demotion. My cheating fiancé went from being my number 1 to 3rd string backup status. You won't believe what happened next. This video and all of its contents, including any opinions expressed by the narrator, are strictly for entertainment purposes only, and is not intended in any way as a substitute for professional services and consultation from a licensed therapist, doctor, attorney, or other licensed professional service provider. Each person must make their own life decisions, and those decisions are theirs. Welcome back to Find Your Alpha. I'm back at you this week with another terrific video story, and you can see the title right on your screen. Cheating fiancé gets demoted to 3rd string backup status. Oh my, let's get into this story and see what it's all about. And the original poster starts out and she says, before telling my story, I'll confess right up front that I am 100% to blame for my current predicament. I was the one who cheated on my boyfriend for no other reason than being selfish. For simplicity's sake, I'm going to call him Harry and call myself Katie. I chose those names as they are my favorite performers. Now she's probably referring to, I'm thinking Harry Styles and Katy Perry, although there could be other Harry and Katys out there, I'm sure. We're both 26 and have officially been a couple for 3 years. We had a dreamlike love story even though our personalities are vastly different. Harry is more right of center, conservative actually, and I'm definitely more left-leaning on everything. Now, I put up a big caution sign here, and that's because in today's modern society, I don't know if people at the opposite ends of the spectrum can get along. I mean, before, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I probably would say, yeah, it's possible even though they're vastly different. But today I just don't see it. He likes to hunt, play cards, and shoot targets, while I like supporting social causes through my social media accounts and volunteering. I'll also confess that bargain clothes shopping is my secret vice. We met at a drag race of all places. He was there with a bunch of his friends and I was there for an employee outing. We were in line across from each other at the concession stand. I think he sensed I was bored and struck up a conversation with me. Since the line was super long, we had a lot of time to talk. His line moved quicker than mine, so he got up to the window first. When he did, he looked back and asked what I wanted. I told him a Diet Coke and he ordered it for me. I tried to pay him, but he refused and said it was his treat. I thanked him and told him that was sweet. Harry then said, "You can return the favor by giving me your phone number." I was hoping he'd ask for it, so I gave it to him right away and he said he'd call me sometime. When he got back to his seat, he texted me and I texted him back. We texted several additional times throughout the races. For days later, we went on our first date and fell in love soon after. In our case, it was a situation where opposites were definitely attracted and the attraction was intense. We became inseparable, save for the times when he and his friends went on their monthly boys' weekends. Now, 2 things I wanted to point out here. First, I put up that caution sign because she's saying they became inseparable. You've got to really be cautious about building your whole life around someone and making them the center of your world. Also, you can see already that she doesn't like him hanging out with his friends, especially going off on these boys' weekends as she calls it. They've been doing this for the past 5 years and never miss a month. They travel all over the place to hunt and fish, and also like going to Las Vegas to play cards and bet on sports. He told me about these trips shortly after we met and I didn't have a problem with it at the time. To be honest though, my hope was he would cut back or stop going on these trips once we became serious, but he didn't. I put up that caution sign because you can see this is a major issue for her with him going away on these trips and hanging out so much with his friends. He'd always tell me about his travel plans well in advance, so I could make plans myself for the time when he was away. Normally on those weekends I'd either go visit my parents, my sister, or one of my friends. Harry normally would return early Sunday evening, and would make it a point to come over and stay the night at my apartment, and he always brought me a little gift every time. Those Sunday evenings when he returned from one of his trips were the most passionate and loving times we ever spent together. Back in September, we celebrated our 3-year anniversary. While out to dinner, we had a discussion where we admitted to each other that we were basically unofficially engaged since we had been completely committed and monogamous since we met. It was then we made a decision to move in together by the end of the year. We thought this would be a good test to see if we were truly compatible living under the same roof. His lease was up at the end of October and mine at the end of the year. We had just signed a lease on a new 2-bedroom apartment in mid-October, and he moved in shortly after just before his lease expired. The weekend Harry moved was hectic and crazy. All of his friends helped him move his furniture and other stuff while I along with 2 of his friends' girlfriends put stuff away. During the entire weekend, Harry spent most of his time with his friends while I spent time with the ladies who I barely knew. Though we all did go out to dinner Saturday night and to brunch on Sunday. During the next week, I spent Monday through Wednesday with Harry at our new place getting everything set up like we wanted and slowly moving some of my stuff in. On Thursday, Harry and his friends had a hunting trip planned out of state. I tried to convince him not to go so that we could continue setting up the apartment, but he insisted as this was their biggest hunting trip of the year. This really upset me, but I didn't show it. He and his friends left on Thursday morning and planned to return on Monday evening. Keep that in mind, folks. That weekend my parents, sister and all my close friends already had plans, so I resigned myself to the fact that I would be spending the next 4 days and nights alone until Harry returned. I planned to continue working on the apartment and watching Netflix all by myself. Now here's where I really messed up. There's a guy, Jason, she says, that works in the same building where I work that had been casually hitting on me for the past 6 months. Well, if this guy has been hitting on you for 6 months, that's not casually hitting on you. He is overtly hitting on you. I'd run into him down at the little cafeteria in the lobby of our building. He was never obnoxious or anything, but you know how you can tell if a guy wants you. I made it known to him that I had a boyfriend and he never pushed any further. Well, on that Thursday I ran into him in the lobby as I was going back up to my office. We chatted for a bit, and he told me that his boss just awarded him front row tickets to see one of my favorite artists. According to him, the tickets were initially for one of their customers, but they had to back out of going at the last minute, so his boss awarded him the tickets because of his job performance. I couldn't believe it. Those tickets originally cost $550, and since the concert was totally sold out, they were going for as high as $3,500 online. I told Jason the artist was one of my favorites and he asked me to go with him. I hesitated for a moment and then told him I can't as I was in a relationship. We talked a while longer about the artist and then parted ways to go back to our offices. That night as I sat alone in our new apartment, I was missing Harry. while at the same time thinking about that concert and how much I wanted to go. The next morning at work, I walked down to the cafeteria to get a coffee prior to starting the day and ran into Jason. Here's where I made the big mistake. He told me he still had the extra ticket and asked if I had changed my mind. Instead of saying no like I should have, I instead asked him if I could meet him there as I couldn't go as his date as I was in a relationship. He said yes, of course. He then told me to wait there in the lobby while he went up to his desk to retrieve the ticket and bring it back to me. He returned a few minutes later, handed me the ticket and said he'd see me when I got there. On my lunch break, I called Harry to let him know I was going to the concert. I told him another company in our building got tickets and offered them up to our company and I got one. I said I would be attending along with other coworkers from my company. So she's completely lying to her boyfriend or fiancé, whatever you want to call him. Throughout the year I attended a number of events for work, so Harry didn't question me about it. He just told me to have fun and to text him when I get to the arena and when I get home. I felt really bad not being totally forthcoming with him, but I knew if I told him who gave me the tickets and who I'd be sitting with, he'd never accept it, even though my only interest was in the tickets and not the guy. Are you sure? As I drove to the venue, I talked to Harry the entire way and sent him several selfies of me at the concert, and the poor guy is off on this hunting trip somewhere. And he's saying, oh look, my girlfriend's out with their coworkers and she's having fun. Meanwhile, she's got her date sitting right beside her. I arrived at my seat just before the concert started, leaving a little time for small talk with Jason. It felt awkward being there with him, but I convinced myself it was okay since I was just attending the concert. I was mesmerized and dancing during the entire show, and hardly spoke to Jason at all during the performance. He wasn't really into the artist, while I'm definitely a raving fan. It was probably the best concert I ever attended, but unfortunately, I'll only remember the event as being one of the worst decisions of my life. After the concert, Jason asked if I wanted to grab a quick drink with him. I told him I couldn't. I thanked him for giving me the ticket and we walked out of the arena together. When we got outside, he insisted on walking me to my car. Along the way, he asked what my plans were for the weekend. I told him I didn't have any plans and was probably just going to do housework. I asked what he was going to do and he said he was going to work out both days and then take it easy the rest of the time. He said that after he works out in the morning, he normally stops at a coffee shop to catch up on his email from the week. It just so happens to be the same coffee shop I go to, but I never saw him there before. Is that really a coffee shop that you go to, or is now that going to be a coffee shop you go to? I told him this and he told me to stop by and say hello if I was in the area tomorrow morning. We got to my car and again I thanked him so much for giving me the ticket and told him how much I enjoyed the concert. It was another awkward moment. There was no kiss, no hug, and not even a handshake. I felt kind of bad as I gave him nothing in return, and he had been such a gentleman. As soon as I started driving, I called Harry and told him what a great time I had. Because of the bottleneck getting out of the parking lot, it took me nearly an hour to drive home. Harry and I continued talking the entire time. The next morning I got up and started working around the apartment, getting things organized and put away. As I was doing so, I started thinking about Jason and how nice he was to me and how I didn't hardly speak to him at all last night, and I started feeling guilty. Around 10 a.m., I decided to go to the coffee shop and see if he was there. My plan was just to drop by to quickly thank him again. I arrived and saw him sitting at a table outside. I went over and greeted him and then went inside to get a coffee and bought him another grande size latte. I went back out and sat down and we started chatting. I only planned to stay there for 5 to 10 minutes, just long enough to thank him again for last night. We started talking and quickly found out we had so many common interests. Unlike Harry, Jason's values were almost totally aligned with mine. We ended up sitting there talking for almost 2 hours, after which we walked next door to grab lunch and continued talking there for another 2 hours. I know it was wrong, but I have to admit I was taken in by him and how much we had in common. Now listen to this. She says he's definitely a guy I would have dated if I wasn't already in a relationship. I should have left things there, but I didn't. Instead, I invited him out to dinner that night so we could continue our discussions. We met at the restaurant at 7 and again we talked throughout the entire meal. We were talking just as friends, but I felt a strong chemistry with him that I just couldn't resist. After we left the restaurant, I didn't want our discussions to end, so I asked if he'd like to continue talking. Well, of course he's going to say yes. He said sure. Where do you want to go? I told him why don't we just go to my place, as we already spent too much money today eating out. While I knew this was a risk, I didn't plan for things to go the way they did. Now come on, you're bringing a guy back to your apartment and you didn't expect things to go the way they did? We're not stupid. We know what you were up to and what you planned on happening. As soon as we arrived at my apartment, we talked for about 10 minutes and then started making out. I don't believe you even talked for 10 minutes. I bet as soon as that door opened, you guys were all over each other. I told him about my situation, but he said he didn't care. Unfortunately, neither did I at that point, and we ended up having intimate relations for the rest of the night until we eventually fell asleep. So man, she forgot about Harry real quick, didn't she? In my mind, I convinced myself this would be a one-time thing and nothing more. After all, Harry was away doing God knows what, so see, she's already trying to justify it, saying, well, I don't know what Harry's doing when he goes on these trips. He could be hooking up with other girls. You see what she's doing here? Now listen to this, listen to this. The next thing I remember was being waken out of a deep sleep by Harry's voice saying, "Good morning, Katie." Being groggy, I didn't immediately remember what happened the previous night, and was at first glad to hear Harry's voice. When I opened my eyes, I saw Harry standing in the doorway, and I asked him why he was home so early. He shook his head and said, "I hope it was worth it," and turned around and walked away. It was then I realized Jason was still lying in bed beside me. I shook him to wake him up, and then I sprang out of the bed wrapped in a sheet and started running out of the room to stop Harry and to explain what happened. As I was doing so, my feet and hands got tangled up in the sheet and I fell face first onto the floor. When I got up, I realized that I had bitten right through my lip. Jason ran over to me and lifted me up and took me into the bathroom, and we applied towels with direct pressure to stop the bleeding. Once things were stabilized, I told him to leave. He insisted on staying, but I told him to please leave and that yesterday and last night was all a big mistake. He wouldn't leave, so I started yelling at him, telling him he ruined everything and to just get out. So you see how she's passing blame now on this Jason. She's telling him, "You ruined my life." No, Katie, you're the one who went out to coffee with him, then to lunch with him, then to dinner with him, and you're the one that brought him home to your apartment. So this is 100% on you because he wasn't in a relationship with your boyfriend. You were. He finally ended up leaving after I kept shouting at him. After he did, I sat on the edge of the tub applying pressure to my lip and crying. When I looked in the mirror, I could tell it was a deep cut and I really should have stitches. So I went to the urgent care that's close to my apartment. There I ended up getting 6 stitches. They also gave me a painkiller and put me on a corticosteroid to reduce the swelling. When I got back to my apartment, my face was aching and I was mentally distraught. I tried reaching Harry to apologize and to explain everything, but he didn't answer. I spent the rest of the day at my apartment crying and beating myself up for what I'd done. All the while I kept trying to contact Harry, but he just ignored my attempts. I really needed to talk to someone and I couldn't tell my family or friends as I was too embarrassed. So I ended up calling Jason to help me make sense of things. So she's telling us all in this story how this Jason ruined her life, and she's only friends with him and it was a big mistake. But yet now she's calling him to talk through things with him. Unbelievable. I first apologized for putting him in that situation. I then explained that what I did yesterday was wrong, and took full responsibility for my actions. I explained to him that I was in love with Harry and wanted to marry him someday. If I was this Jason, I would say, really, come on. I told Jason I'd like to keep our relationship to being just friends. Well, you've already gone way past friends because we shared so much in common. But we could never be alone again because I was in love with Harry. Jason tried convincing me to break off my relationship with Harry, as he wanted us to be together, but I told him no. I said what I did was wrong and I know who I am and I was meant to be Harry's partner. Jason then asked me to consider at least keeping our intimate relationship going as I tried working through things with Harry. So Jason was saying, "Man, I really like what we did there last night. Why don't we keep this going, and then you could see if you work things out with Harry, and if you do, you can go be with Harry, but in the meantime you and I could keep hooking up." I told him no. I would never do that to Harry. I explained that our relationship could only consist of cordial conversations whenever we casually bumped into each other and nothing more. That's how I left things with Jason. I ended up taking Monday and Tuesday off to recuperate from my accident, and to try making contact with Harry, but he's totally shut me out. Good for you, Harry. The silent treatment is always the best way to go. He's not answering my calls or texts and I can't blame him. I feel so bad. All I want to do is apologize to him and ask for another chance. I know I'd never hurt him again and I could prove it if he just let me try. Let me know if you think I should keep trying or if I should just give up and try to move on. The problem is I don't think I can make it without Harry at my side. He's been my rock and my light and I can't see myself existing in the world without him. So that's the end of her original post, and now we're going to take a look at a few responses she got back from the community. But before we do, I want to encourage you, if you've liked what you've heard so far, make sure you hit that like button right now. That will help get this video seen by people all over the planet. Now let's take a look at some of those responses. The first one's from a woman. She says, "If you are truly sincere about your love for Harry, then I would throw myself at his feet and tell him you will do anything to prove it. At this point you've totally blown up what you had, so it will take extreme measures to get back to where you were. I cheated on my first boyfriend in college and quickly regretted it." She says, "He took me back and I did everything for him, and I thought things were going well, but he suddenly dumped me after 4 months and started dating another woman who he eventually ended up marrying. I realize now that he was the love of my life, and I wish I had taken even more drastic measures to keep him. Now listen to this last part, she says. She says, I'll never forget him and still think about him often, even though that all happened years ago and I've since married and have a great husband and family. So even though this woman now is married and this is years ago this all happened and she's got kids and everything, she's still thinking about that guy. So that poor guy that married her was obviously her second choice or her third choice or her fourth choice, who knows, and he's probably thinking, oh, I've got a wonderful wife and family. Meanwhile, this wife is still dreaming about a guy that she did dirty 20 years ago or something. Unbelievable. Next we have a response from a guy. He says, people on here are not as stupid and gullible as you think. We can see right through your games and manipulation. It's clear you are attracted to this Jason guy and your plan was to juggle a relationship with him and Harry at the same time, then eventually select the one you want to be with. I've seen women do this before, and I'm ashamed to say I've fallen for it, but never again. Harry would be a fool to take you back, he says. And next we have another response from a woman. She says, regardless of what you are telling us, it's clear from your story, you do not love or even desire Harry. The guy who rings your bell is Jason. You should let Harry go to find someone who will be compatible with him, and you should pursue a relationship with Jason. Where I'm afraid you may have hurt your chances with Jason is that you cheated on Harry with him. I know this may seem counterintuitive, but the fact you so quickly had sex with him while in a 3-year relationship with Harry conveys to Jason that you are someone who is probably not reliable. Probably not reliable? I would say definitely not reliable. In the back of his mind, I'm sure he's now thinking, if she did this to him, she'll likely do it to me someday. You should address this with him right up front, she says. And then finally we've got another response from a guy. He says, you're the reason so many men are choosing not to marry these days. So let me get this straight, you're in a 3-year relationship with a guy and talking about spending the rest of your life with him, and then some guy comes and offers you concert tickets and you end up sleeping with him the very next night. Please tell me your post was all work of fiction. If not, you've got some serious problems to work on, sister. So those were some of the responses she got, and now we're going to take a look at some of the updates that she's given. The first one came 17 days later. She says, I apologize for not giving an update sooner, but as you know, I've had a lot going on in my personal life. Before I start, I want to address something that has come up in a number of the comments I received. I do not love Jason and have no interest in getting into a relationship with him. While we do have a lot in common, and share many of the same interests, he could never mean anything to me as long as Harry exists in the world. Now, if I never met and fell in love with Harry, that might be a different story. What I'm saying here is Harry is my soulmate, and as long as he's alive while I'm alive, he will always be my number one guy. I'll now pick up on things where I last left off. As I said in my original post, I took Monday and Tuesday of that week off to recuperate from my fall and try to get in touch with Harry. Harry blocked my number and changed his status to single on Facebook. I knew when people would see this, they would start asking questions, so I had to get out in front of it. I called my mom and told her about my fall and the stitches. She was worried about me and wanted to come down to spend a few days with me. I told her that wasn't necessary since I was feeling better, and the swelling had gone down. She asked if Harry went with me to the urgent care and I told her no. I then explained that her and I were going through a rough patch and hadn't spoken for a few days. I think she has a typo there. I think she meant to say he and I were going through a rough patch and hadn't spoken for a few days. Mom then started asking me 1,000 questions about what was going on. I told her we were working through things and everything would be okay. She and my dad love Harry and have been encouraging us to get married and give them another grandchild. Mom and I talked a bit longer and I thought that was that, but then things took a turn for the worse that evening. Mom called me and started yelling at me, asking why I didn't tell her I cheated on Harry. I asked what she was talking about and she told me that she called Harry and he told her that he and I were no longer together. She kept asking him why and he told her to ask me. According to her, she told him that she wasn't going to hang up until he told her the truth. So instead of Harry just maintaining his silence, he instead sent Mom a picture he took of Jason and I in bed together. I didn't know he took the picture and was horrified. The picture is of Jason laying on his back and me laying across his chest with my head just below his chin and my bare back exposed. Like I said, I was horrified and had to tell Mom the truth about why we broke up. Mom spent the next hour yelling at me at the top of her lungs. I couldn't get her to stop and finally had to hang up on her. She called back a couple hours later and we talked through things. Cheating is a real hot button issue for Mom, as she raised me and my 3 siblings to be faithful and trustworthy people and to never cheat. The reason this was such a hot button issue for Mom is that she cheated on Daddy 1 year after they were married with an ex-boyfriend. At the time, my parents were struggling financially, and she admits it was a weak moment for her, and the biggest mistake of her life. So I guess you could say the acorn doesn't fall far from the tree. Daddy caught them in the act and made her move out and filed for an annulment. Mom kept begging Dad to give her a second chance, but he kept moving forward with the divorce. Then, like a miracle, a week before the hearing date, Daddy decided to give Mom another chance. That was 33 years ago, and they've since gone on to have a fairy tale marriage with 4 kids and 7 grandchildren. When each of us kids reached an age where we were old enough to understand, Mom sat us down and explained what she did. Well, I have to give the mother credit for doing that. Now, if the mom actually did that and really sat them down and explained she cheated on their father years ago and that it was wrong and to never do that, I give her a lot of credit for doing so. She also pointed out the guy she cheated with to us so that we could see what a big mistake she made. The guy is a complete loser who doesn't work and lives in public housing. He also weighs about 400 pounds now and drives around town on one of those scooters. Ever since she and Daddy reconciled, she has treated him like a king, and he deserves it. He's been a wonderful dad to us, and our mom has been a wonderful mom. None of us can believe what she did, and that's why cheating is such a sensitive subject for her. Now here's where it gets worse. Mom told me I had to tell my dad what I did. I told her I didn't want to, as I knew it would break his heart and make him think less of me. She said I had to, and that I needed to travel back home to tell him in person. So that weekend I drove back home to tell Daddy. When he saw me, Dad was concerned about the visible cut on my lip and started asking how I got it, and I told him I just fell down in the bedroom. After explaining that, I told Dad what I did and he started crying. Then Mom started crying and I started crying. Dad excused himself from the room while Mom and I sat there crying our eyes out. When Dad returned, he asked me about Harry, and I told him Harry broke up with me, but I was trying to get him back. I then said I hope he is as forgiving and loving as you are, Dad. What Dad said next shocked me and really hurt Mom. Dad said he would advise Harry not to give me a second chance because the whole process is just too taxing mentally. He said the best thing for us is to go our separate ways and find someone new to make a fresh start. Mom then asked Dad if he was sorry he gave her a second chance. He said, "No, you gave me 4 beautiful children." She then said, "If I didn't give you children, would you still say the same?" And he said, "Probably not." Hearing this crushed Mom, and she cried for the rest of the day. Later that night, after we ate dinner, Dad explained himself. He told Mom he loves her and wouldn't trade her for anything now, but said that the first 5 or 6 years after she cheated on him were mentally stressful, and something that he wouldn't wish on his worst enemy. Mom cried and they talked for a long time at the table. Thankfully, by the end of the conversation they kissed and hugged, and everything is back to normal for them. Driving home, I felt so terrible for not only cheating on Harry, but for ripping open an old scar from my parents that I thought had totally healed years ago. I promise you I have learned a lesson and will never be unfaithful again. For now, I'm going to focus on getting Harry back and proving to him that I can be the loving and trustworthy partner I was before. Well, let me tell you something, Katie, you're never going to be able to prove that, even if he does take you back, and just like your dad took back your mom, it's never going to be 100% of what it was before. You just have to face that. Now she comes back with her final update so we can see what happened, and the final update came 3.5 months later. She says, "I've come back to close the book on this post and to move on to the next phase of my life. After trying unsuccessfully for 3 months to get Harry to talk to me, I've finally given up. I know what I did to him was inexcusable, and we will both be scarred by my actions for the rest of our lives, but the least he could have done was given me closure." Well, I think you gave yourself closure when you jumped in the sack with this Jason. You gave the relationship closure, so he doesn't owe you anything more than that. I'm mentally defeated and have been going to counseling for the past 2 months. The counselor told me she believes I am truly sorry and remorseful for my actions, and that I will likely never do again what I did to Harry. She also said that no matter how sincere you are, oftentimes the betrayed partner never sees it in their heart to give the cheating partner closure. This can cause severe mental distress to the cheating partner, which can lead them to do terrible things. I told her I can totally relate to that because that's how I felt since the day Harry caught me cheating. Not that I would ever consider harming myself, but I just don't have motivation to move forward with anything, and some days I don't want to get out of bed. The past few weeks for me have been very difficult as I found out Harry has started dating again. In fact, I've seen him with 2 different women going in and out of his new apartment. Now listen to what she says next. "Yes, I will admit that I've been stalking him, but not in an evil way. When I'm feeling really bad, I drive over to his place and sit in the parking lot, watching his door from a distance, hoping I can catch a glance of him. Folks, don't do what she's doing. Never stalk an ex. I mean, that is totally unhealthy and downright psychotic." She says, "Last Saturday, I ran into one of Harry's friend's girlfriends at the farmer's market. I asked if she had a few minutes to talk, and we grabbed some apple cider and sat at one of the picnic tables to talk. I of course asked her a million questions about Harry. She knew what happened between us as Harry told all his friends, and they of course told their girlfriends. She was very guarded in her responses to me, but she did share one thing that pretty much decided things for me. She said that Harry told his friends that he is looking for a girl to marry, and in the meantime he would be dating a bunch of second-string women for physical pleasure. The 2 women he's seeing now are both divorced and in their mid-30s, so he's dating some cougars there. He's made it clear to them that they will never be more than FWB-type lovers, and they are apparently okay with it. I then asked her if based on what she knows if there was a chance he would ever take me back. She just looked at me with a sense of pity on her face and kind of grimaced. I asked her to level with me and just tell me. She said based on what she knows there's no way. I then asked what she knows and she said Harry told his friends that if he ever gets really desperate and none of his second stringers are available he might consider calling me for a quick fix but nothing more. I asked her if he said those words and she said that's what her boyfriend told her. After hearing this I thanked her and we left. I cried for the rest of the day realizing my relationship with Harry was broken beyond repair. It was time to move on. My counselor has been working to help me get past this but it's really hard. Thanks to everyone who read my posts and especially to those of you who encouraged me throughout this process. So that's the end of her story. Now for this Harry, I think he handled the situation appropriately. You know, he came home, he caught her in bed with another guy. Instead of acting crazy and getting physical with a guy and potentially getting himself in a bunch of trouble, he just tells her okay, I hope it was worth it, turns around and heads out the door and then completely cuts contact with her. That of course drives her crazy. It's eating away at her still, but you know what, that's her fault. She needs to pick up the pieces now and move forward, and I'm sure this Harry is going to be just fine. There's going to be plenty of women out there for him. He's in his mid-20s. He's apparently got a job. He's working. He's doing well for himself. It sounds like he'll have no problems getting someone else, and for her she's in her mid-20s and I'm sure she's an attractive girl. She'll have no problems getting someone else, but what she needs to do, she needs to be truthful with him right up front and say the last relationship I was in lasted for 3 years and we broke up because I cheated on him. Now will she tell her next beau that? Probably not, but that's what she should do. Now let's take a look at what I think are the morals of this story. First of all, in today's world, people on opposite sides of the social and political spectrum are nearly incompatible. Like I said previously, I would have told you, yeah, it could work out. It'll be a little awkward, but it could still work out. In today's world, I just don't think it will work. Next, cheating is never just a physical thing with women. Don't believe what they say. There are always emotions involved. Next, and I said this on the last story, mental stress will eventually impact your physical health. Look at this girl's dad. He said for 5 or 6 years after he took his wife back after she cheated on him, he was mentally stressed. Why do you want to live your life like that? You know, life is too short. Don't stay with someone who betrayed you. Next, the betrayed partner never fully recovers from infidelity. Again, using her dad as an example, 33 years later, you can still see that still eats away at that guy whenever he thinks about it, and that's the way it is when people take someone back who's cheated on them. That's always going to be in the back of their mind. Next, a strong man will never accept any form of cheating. It doesn't matter if it was 1 time, 10 times, 100 times. It doesn't matter if she's emotionally connected to him or not, which I just said that's all bunk because there's always emotions involved. A strong man will never accept any form of cheating. And then finally, as I always say, after cheating occurs, go your separate ways. Focus on your mental, physical, and financial health and move on with your life. So those are my thoughts, and now I want to hear from you. What did you think of this story, and how do you think this guy handled the situation? Would you have handled it like he did, or would you have done something completely different? Tell us about it in the comments. Also be sure to hit that like button. Share this video with your friends and subscribe to this channel. And I will
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's story is unbelievable. It's about how my cheating girlfriend tried to introduce her affair partner as her stepbrother. You won't believe how this one unfolds. My girlfriend was a very superficial girl. She was going to a beauty school to become a hair and makeup artist. I was going to school to become an engineer. I didn't think any less of her for what her career choice was. She was lovely and charming, like Snow White, and cared about the people she encountered. At least, that was what she let me see of her. I took her to a family reunion after we dated for a year, and my mom got some one-on-one time with her in the kitchen. She reported back to me, telling me to dump this girl as fast as possible. I was shocked by the impression she got, and thought my mom was crazy when she told me my girlfriend was extremely rude, selfish, and inconsiderate. I just didn't see what she saw, so I couldn't bring myself to break up with her. She kept surprising me at my dorm with food, movie rentals, or games to play. She also looked forward to any chance I got to take her out clubbing. Usually, I was busy dedicating myself to my studies. I knew my college education would require sheer determination, strength, and focus. Graduation means I wasn't distracted by a woman or, God forbid, getting one pregnant. I knew my girlfriend didn't want to conceive, but she swore she could time her cycle, so there were a few times she persuaded me not to wear protection. One night, my girlfriend tried really hard to convince me to take her out to a venue that had live music and cheap drinks. I told her I couldn't and maintained my resolve. She got pretty upset with me, and I saw her face fade from smiling and adorable to a resentful frown with piercing eye contact. She left without another word, but it made me mad because she strutted out with her angry supermodel walk. It seemed obvious she planned to go without me, which made it impossible for me to focus on studying. I drove to the venue 30 minutes later and spotted her on the dance floor with another man, surrounded by sweaty people. I watched her and kept my distance while I had a drink. I was curious to see the side of her that my mom warned me about. I didn't believe she'd be so low to cheat on me. She valued me as her man and admired my mind. I thought she wanted a secure and happy future with me. What I saw proved the opposite. She was acting like the most gorgeous and newly single woman in the place. It was only a short time before she let the man she was dancing with lead her back to the bar, where they did one more shot before leaving together. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I followed his car while he drove poorly and failed to notice my tailing him. I parked just about 200 feet behind them, so I saw them go into his apartment. I knocked on the door 20 minutes later after deciding it was what I wanted to do. No one answered, even though I know they heard me. Eventually, he answered the door, and when my girlfriend saw me, she tried to look happy and calm. She said this wasn't what I thought it was, that he was actually her gay stepbrother, and they hung out sometimes. He looked at her like she was crazy. She shoved past him to leave with me and closed the door in his face. We started walking away, but AP didn't want to play along. He felt used and embarrassed. He opened the door again to shout that he was sorry for sleeping with my girlfriend, and she told him she was single. I pulled away from her, and she just kept saying that it wasn't true. I told her that even if she didn't sleep with him, I knew he wasn't her gay stepbrother, and I saw the way she danced with him at the club. That was enough for me to believe what my mom said about her. She said I was being unfair because she claimed to be innocent, but I refused to be made a fool for trusting her after this weird night and my mom's warning. I left her there, right by AP's house. She posted dramatic things about me on Facebook, that I left her in the nowhere in the middle of the night, and that I accused her of cheating when she wasn't that kind of person. I felt a little helpless about all the bashing, but I ultimately didn't care because I knew who I was and what I wanted to become. I went back to my studies and forgot all about my ex-girlfriend. To my surprise, just 4 months later, she posted on Facebook with the happy news that she was expecting. 1 hour later, she was publicly freaking out because AP dumped her and accused her of cheating. Apparently, AP couldn't have children, so he knew he was not the father, even though my ex tried to claim he was. It was a huge mess, and I'm glad I got out of the whole situation when I did. My mom was relieved too. Years later, I'm working as an engineer, and my ex is a single mother of two that never obtained her cosmetology degree. Opie, I am sorry your girlfriend proved herself to be a selfish and manipulative woman. You dodged a bullet, thanks to your mother's warning and girlfriend's telling behavior. It worked out really well to follow her that night, and it was the only time you had to, because you were too smart to be playing these games. She was extremely immature, and it worries me to think about all the men she'll probably trick into loving her. Unless, through some miracle, she learns her lesson and becomes a trustworthy woman. Now she has her kids to consider and put above her own desires. Sometimes it takes a shocking life mistake like this to realize the world doesn't bend to your wishes, and you'll get yourself into a bad place if you think selfishly or take advantage of others. Thank you for sharing your story. Now, let's get into our second story for today. I, 41, didn't realize that my wife, 35, was talking to several other men behind my back. The man she talked to the longest paid her for pictures and videos when we were struggling financially. We had 3 kids, one of them nearly an adult, and we were married for 10 years. After she felt like she could get away with talking to AP behind my back, she started making up stories for places she had to go to. One night she told me she was going to get her hair done, and she did, but it took a long time. Another time, this could have happened many times. While I was at work and the kids were at school, she spent the day with him. He was like her sugar daddy. I didn't know she was sneaking out or doing anything behind my back until I got a call from a married woman we were both friends with for about 7 years. She was crying and said she just found out her husband was cheating on her. I was shocked to hear this and told her I was so sorry. I was shocked because when I spent time with her husband, he told me how much he loved his wife. I recalled one time we were alone together and he spoke highly of his wife and then asked me how my wife felt, but then he corrected himself to how I felt about my wife. Right after this memory, she told me my wife was the one sleeping with him. I instantly understood why she was calling me. I had a vision of my heart plopping onto a platter and a fork stabbing it, then a knife cutting into it. I asked her how she knew, and she said she was holding her husband's phone at that very moment. He forgot it when he said he was going to meet some friends. She tells me she was looking at their messages right now, and he lied. He was going to meet my wife at a book club. Hearing her mention the book club made it all too real. That was definitely my wife's thing. She would go every week, but she never invited me to go. I wasn't much of a reader. AP's wife sent me pictures of what was going on while I drove to the book club. These messages mentioned times they had sex, things they wanted to do, and risk pictures. They were all about to get a rude awakening. I busted down the door and found 8 women, all intently and dreamily listening to AP, the only man in the room, reading a romance novel out loud. My wife was wrapped around his arm with her head on his shoulder. The room gasped and looked at me when I walked in. My wife jumped straight to standing, and AP looked like his worst fears were realized. I looked him dead in the eye and said his wife knew what he was doing. He could only say no, but I said yes and added that she sent me the messages between him and you. I pointed to my wife, then AP ran out the door. My wife covered her mouth, and all the other women stared with gaping mouths as this unfolded. I told her she made a vow to me 10 years ago and gave birth to my children only for our marriage to end like this. My voice cracked and tears started flowing. I told her she ruined 2 marriages and I never wanted her to come back into my home again. She very quietly said that this didn't have to happen because she was sorry and learned her lesson. I told her I didn't give a crap if she learned her lesson. That would only benefit her future, but now I had to pick up the pieces of my own life, the life that she gave up for another man. Then I left. One of the women chased me down and handed me a little piece of paper with her phone number on it. All the other women started whispering and awkwardly leaving, itching to spread the word around town about the book club breakup. As soon as I got home, I realized this building didn't feel like home anymore, just a grave of the life I was living. So I packed up the kids and everything I could over the next few days and with my brother's help, moved into my parents' house 3 hours away. This was what I needed to do while I divorced my wife and got financially situated to the point where I could buy a new home. Meanwhile, AP was divorced and moved in with my ex. They probably thought everything was going to be okay for them until they were both ordered to pay child support. But that's not all. AP found out just a few weeks later that he wasn't my wife's only lover, and after some thought, she decided she could do better than him. She moved out, leaving him broke and the sole person living in our old marital home. She moved in with some dangerously rich man. She was treated pretty well there at first, and they actually decided to have a baby together. However, while the paint was drying in the nursery, my wife's new husband cheated on her. Then he wanted the new woman to be his wife and have his babies. So he kicked out my ex, providing her the money for an abortion. I don't know if any of you guys believe in karma, but I am certain that's what happened here. My wife wanted the money and didn't give a crap about anyone else. So that's literally what she got. Temporary riches from someone that didn't give a crap about her. I've since bought a new place and remarried. I thought I should share this story to inspire people, particularly men, who were betrayed by a woman that they trusted. As much as it hurts, we are strong enough to get through it. Men are meant to take the hardest crap dealt in the world. We don't even need much to keep on going. But if a woman fails you, just get another one. I know that sounds heartless, but I was able to do just that very thing. No matter what you're faced with, always be communicative and caring while knowing your own boundaries and what you deserve. That's how you just keep surviving and functioning. Opie, I am glad to hear that justice was served to your cheating wife. There may not be such a thing as two souls destined for each other, but as mature adults, we each have the chance and responsibility to wisely choose the partner we want to commit to and love, no matter what. The person that matches us as closely as possible, among other factors. And when it seems to be getting boring or difficult, you fight to rekindle the love and commitment that you found in each other. If there are things to talk about them. That's how you solve things that are causing problems, no matter how painful, humiliating, or uncertain it is. And if there aren't any jaw-breaking problems, and there's still love in the relationship, then there's no reason to betray. Them being bored, under stress, or tempted by another person certainly is not enough to put your loved one through a tragic life event they must overcome. I'm glad to hear you've overcome this extremely difficult time in your life. Remember, you are worthy of all the love and happiness you find. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened.